So Cenk's nephew, who we haven't talked about for a long time on this channel since he's primarily moved to Twitch and I don't have the time, energy, nor the patience to go through his 8-hour streams, the bulk of which are him eating while he's playing another person's video, committing an obvious fair use violation, was recently suspended for Twitch due to his open and blatant anti-white racism. And of course, whenever we talk about anti-white racism, people on the far left get really angry because this is a socially acceptable form of racism and they like to be able to put their hate out in the world, and anytime there's consequences for the left wing that would get a right wing person outright banned, they cry and they play victim and they all rally around the fact that they can't do anything wrong because what they're doing is broadly accepted by our society. And a perfect example of this is the Young Turks video where they covered this and they basically scoffed at the idea that Cenk's nephew did anything wrong, even though his moderators got banned for using this term before, and then he proceeded to use it and didn't expect to suffer the same consequences as the plebs who moderate his chat. It's ridiculous in every single way. This story won't age well. But speaking of aging well, we got a sponsor, Health with Justice. Whether we like it or not, our appearance plays a big role in our satisfaction and success in life. And unfortunately, there's a lot of shady shadow companies that like to take advantage of this. So they sell you products that don't really work and they're way overpriced. However, there are products that work out there and you can find some of them at Health with Justice. This collagen powder right now actually has 5 different collagen levels and it works by attacking the things that cause aging at its root. I scoop it up and I put it in my coffee in the morning and look at my little bit of baby skin Sean face right here. If you want to get some of this, I got a very special deal for you guys. If you go to my URL, healthwithjustice.com, for the next 24 hours, you will get 51% off your order of this powder. It's absolutely amazing. 60-day money-back guarantee if you don't feel like it's working. But if you want this baby soft skin, then definitely go and get it. Healthwithjustice.com. So first of all, we need to point this out because it's a very special occasion on this channel. Anna Kasparian is actually wearing the exact same shirt in this video that she wore in the very famous "Oh, you said it was a white guy, what happened" clip. Let me play the video so that you can understand it and understand why this portion of Anna Kasparian is likely to appear in my thumbnail of this video.
Oh, so you said that it was a white guy. What happened? Our sweet nephew, Hasan Piker, is in trouble. And it turns out that he got banned from the platform that shot him to fame, Twitch, because he used an incredibly offensive word.
Oh my God, Anna, what was it?
Number 2, they're covering this obviously in the way that you would expect people on the left wing to cover this, where they're like very dismissive and is trying to fake hold back laughter. There's no actual laughter here, and they're going to make the case that this is not a racial slur and it shouldn't be considered a racial slur because of reasons, and let's hear them get into the argument.
I mean, look, the word is so offensive that we might need to target a franchise, a restaurant franchise that also uses the word in their name, Cracker Barrel.
No, that's C-word barrel.
C-word barrel. Apologies. Okay. I'm so sorry. Oh my God. I really hope I don't get canceled for this.
Yeah, and it's got the word country in it too. Some people find that as an old other C-word store, C-word barrel.
So proving that the Young Turks are one of the stupidest non-news organizations on the platform of YouTube, they immediately say, oh, if cracker is a racial epithet in certain contexts, it must be a racial epithet in all contexts, which is absolutely absurd and ridiculous. They point to Cracker Barrel as somehow a racist name for a restaurant in an effort to be comedic, but it just goes to show you that they don't understand the level of context involved in what Cenk's nephew is doing. He was using this specifically to insult white people because they were white, because he hates white people. That is not the same thing as this word in another context when it has another meaning. Considering that they're going to definitely compare this to the N-word and say, it's not as bad as the N-word, therefore that means it's totally fine, which makes no sense. A lot of things aren't as bad as other things. That doesn't make them fine. If you kill one person, it's not as bad as killing 10 people, but killing one person is still murder. But the option of the N-word is actually really odd because black people use the N-word all the time, and it's never a slur when they use it. So cracker, in some contexts, not being an anti-white attack makes perfect sense, even with the confines of the argument that they're almost certainly going to make.
So let me give you guys the context here. Twitch has decided to implement a 1-week suspension for Haas, and there are other streamers who are now also experiencing this suspension. For instance, Vosh is another streamer. He is indefinitely suspended because apparently he used the word cracker in his stream.
Now, I'm not going to address Vosh very much in this video, and the reason for that is because Vosh actually said the word cracker in order to get suspended because he wanted attention. He saw that Cenk's nephew was getting all this attention for this bad take, so he ended up going on board with it just so his name could be trending next to Cenk's nephew's name on Twitter, which is pathetic. It's absolutely attention-seeking behavior. He's trying to graft onto somebody who's larger than him as a content creator, the same that he did with Destiny until all of a sudden Destiny was not useful to him anymore. And it just goes to show you the level of character in Vosh. Now, Vosh, by the way, the reason his suspension would be indefinite is because he was actually revived from a Twitter permaban after he got very popular, because Vosh said on a stream something to the effect that Israel should be destroyed because somehow that country is causing the problems in the Middle East. So this was considered a second strike for him. Now, you guys will remember that Cenk's nephew celebrated an attack on Dan Crenshaw and said that America deserved the attacks of September 11th, also on Twitch, but he's far and beyond the regular consequences of regular people, which is why this is a news story, because Cenk's nephew is used to everything being handed to him, being treated with kid gloves, using connections to get by, and now he's actually facing consequences, and he can't personally deal with the fact that he's facing consequences that normal people tend to face.
And so this all started when Hasan noticed that 2 of his moderators or mods had been suspended from Twitch, and it was because they had used the word cracker. That sparked a debate with others in his community who disagree with his take on cracker. He does not think that it's offensive, and it is not the equivalent of using, let's say, the N-word, which is an actual racial slur.
Every single conversation about this suspension, isn't about what's actually at play. I just told you what was actually at play. Cenk's nephew knew something was bannable under Twitch's terms of service. He thought that he was above that because he's been handed everything in his life on a silver platter. He faced the consequences, and now he's crying about it. But Anna Kasparian, Cenk's nephew, all the people involved in this story that are on his side, keep going back to, well, it's not as bad as the N-word, it's not considered as socially unacceptable as the N-word, therefore it's not a racial slur, which is kind of ridiculous because slurs for Asians, which are definitely slurs, are not considered as bad as the N-word in the United States of America, but you would still be banned for saying those just because we don't allow racial slurs on these platforms, is the argument that Twitch is making. And clearly, anti-white racism is the racism that is promoted broadly among the left wing, and Twitch finally actually enforcing their terms of service in an equal way. And I don't agree with the bans or any of that, but they're actually being consistent a little bit in this moment. Making an example of one of their bigger streamers is what's getting them mad, because the left want privilege. They want the ability to control what you say, but they don't want any influence on what they say.
So he talked about this through Twitter, saying, yes, it is for exactly what you think it is, anti-white racism for using the term cracker. And we do have the video of where he had used that word. So let's just take a quick look at that offensive video.
I've been called a cracker more times than every single one of you pasty little cracker bitches in my chat, okay? Let's be real for a second, okay, Mr. Alabama? I've been called a load more than you. Why? Because I'm extremely online, okay? So shut the up. Stop crying about this term, okay? Recognize that the person who's calling you a is literally powerless, okay? Sorry, it's just the truth. A person calling you a is powerless. They're doing it as someone who's been historically oppressed, blowing off steam, okay? You can say that that's infantilizing or whatever, but that's truly the reality.
So first of all, let's go into the fact that Cenk's nephew thinks that he's being called a cracker all the time on the internet. If this happens, it's due to the fact that black people who attack him for whatever stupid takes that he has that he doesn't like, more further left black people, don't like him, and they try to invalidate him by calling him white in some manner of way. Obviously, Cenk's nephew is from Turkey. He's Islamic. He talks about how he's culturally Muslim multiple different times. A bunch of the nicknames for him that are on the internet include the word brown, because when it's convenient for him, Cenk's nephew will play the brown card, but since it's convenient for him here, he believes, he'll say, oh, I'm technically white for some reason in there, even though Turks are not considered white. But whatever, that's not really the point. The point that he's trying to make is that, and he even says it in his video, that blacks and minorities and all these people who are insulting white people deserve to be infantilized, and therefore the hatred in their heart, their attacks based on race, don't really count as much because they have no power. Again, this is hilarious victim playing by somebody who's incredibly successful on Twitch, has a large platform, and he's attacking people in his audience who would be, by their very nature, less powerful if we went by the dynamics that he was picking up. On top of that, there was actually a post that he read in a different video that I can't seem to find right now, where one of the members of his community talked about how Cenk's nephew would be one of the most racist people in the 1900s. And Cenk's nephew, being the intellectual lightweight that he is, reacted to that by saying, literally, Hitler was alive in the 1900s, therefore I would not be worse than Hitler, therefore debunked, whatever. But what that person was getting at, and the point that I want to get out during the course of this video, is that these people would be the racists, because they are the racists now, back in the day. They would not be the civil rights leaders. They would not be the people fighting against what they call oppression or anything like that. Because all they're doing over and over again is just repeating and promoting the socially acceptable forms of racism. You put them at different periods of time where different types of socially acceptable racism was okay and broadly done in our society, and that's exactly who they would be. They like to pretend they're standing up to the powerful or some nonsense like that, but in reality, these are the people that would be in favor of segregation. These are the people that would be sicking the dogs on black people trying to end segregation, because at the time that was socially acceptable, and that's their only standard for activism. What he was talking about is this idea that permeates throughout our society, that it's okay to be racist against white people because historic blah 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 whatever nonsensical garbage. But in reality, that doesn't really hold up. But what it is just a convenient excuse for them to be racist against white people. A perfect example of this is racism against Japanese and how popular it was in the decades following World War II. This was broadly accepted in the United States of America, despite the fact that the Japanese were basically in no way, shape, or form oppressed. They were much more an oppressive force. Ask people in China, ask people in Korea how they feel about the Japanese. But these people wouldn't tolerate anti-Japanese epithets based on this same standard, that if they were the oppressor in that scenario, they deserve it, because historically, the people that are calling them that are, in fact, some people that were victimized by them. They wouldn't accept it from people who were victimized even directly by the Japanese government during the Pearl Harbor. That just wouldn't happen. They bring up internment, say, oh, white people were oppressing Japanese, even though that's a thing that happens during war. It's not acceptable. I would not have advocated for it at the time. It's obviously morally wrong. And that's why Republican administration, the Ronald Reagan administration, actually apologized for those actions, because their god, FDR, did this without cause during World War II. And by the way, it was replicated in Canada, and they were actually held in detainment in Canada for far longer in the United States of America. But the Japanese, without any doubt, were an imperial oppressive power in the Asian continent. They attacked the United States in Pearl Harbor, and they would not tolerate today racism against the Japanese based on the fact that historically they were an oppressive force. They would make excuses and say, actually, this, that, or the other, and it's not okay, blah, 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 because they don't have standards. They're just looking for a convenient way in order to justify their racism, very similar to the way that racists back in the day in the United States of America would look for convenient explanations to promote their racism against certain minority groups.
Obviously, Hasan and I are both from a Muslim background. We're from the same family.
Yes, we know that Cenk's nephew is in fact Cenk's nephew. Thank you, Cenk, for the update.
But Hasan looks pretty white, so that's why he gets called that word all the time as well, right? And so the reason it doesn't bother him, it doesn't bother any rational person, is because there's nobody being lynched after being called cracker, okay? There's no one being discriminated against after. You show me one case where black people or Latinos or whoever used it had so much power and they said, I don't want crackers working here, and then they discriminated against them. It's not a thing. It's not a thing.
So Cenk right here proposes a standard and he thinks it's a solid point, even though it really isn't. And him including Latinos basically undercuts his premise completely, because first and foremost, lynching wasn't something that was uniquely tied to black people. White people were lynched more than black people. We had a lot of vigilante public executions in the United States of America. This was just a common thing. And then later on, it got tied specifically to black people in our history in the public consciousness, but in reality, more white people were lynched than black people. On top of that, black people are consistently more likely to kill white people than the other way around. The Young Turks has directly inspired people like Nestor Flanagan, who killed white people because they hated white people. There was also that other case of the guy who shot 4 white people specifically to kill white people because anti-white racism is very prominent among the black community, people who care more about race than any other group in the United States of America. And in terms of job applications and people being discriminated against because they're white in jobs, when you include Latinos in there, I obviously don't think Cenk did this intentionally, but that includes the casting of Hamilton, which very publicly didn't want any white people cast in those roles. And they put out flyers that were blatantly and obviously discrimination. Now, Cenk would support all of this because Cenk hates white people, as we've gone over in multiple different videos. I did a video on his entire insane white rant where he talked about how black people aren't angry enough at white people, how they're sick of white people, and how white people are disgusting and blah, blah, blah in every single way. And they're the most racist and most inherently violent and all the other racial stereotypes that you would expect from a far left racist in our modern day society to go unpunished. That video is fully monetized by the Young Turks, by the way, even though it's dripping with racism. But yeah, Cenk, great example.
So yes, some people use it in a derogatory fashion. By the way, it's also a very normal word in the English language. Are we banning Ritz crackers? Whereas the N-word is only used in that context, so context matters.
Again, we went over this earlier in the video. Cenk is saying it's a very normal word that's used in different contexts. Twitch isn't banning you from using it in the context that's not a racial pejorative. They're banning you from using it in the context that is, which is how Cenk's nephew was in fact using it. And Cenk's argument about the N-word never being used outside of that context, I mean, again, listen to any black music, any black person talk on the street, or a lot of black people talk in public. It is not always used as a pejorative. Among black people, it is used perfectly fine. And that's why Twitch actually has some exemptions for black people using the word. They don't ban them for that. So right now, Cenk is lying to you, he's being dumb, and he's just misstating what the policy actually is. Cenk's nephew was using it as an anti-white pejorative because that's who Cenk's nephew is. He's somebody who hates white people because he's insecure about himself as a person. And there's really no counter argument if you believe that social media companies should suspend or ban people based on insults about their immutable characteristics, that Cenk's nephew was in fact in violation of those policies. It's clear and obvious he had warning in that his moderators were banned for using it, and then he started using it after knowing that. So what is this story about?
By the way, if you say the N-word in a news context, quoting someone else, there's nothing wrong with that in my opinion. Now, mores have changed about that, but I wouldn't ban anybody for that, obviously, right? But in this case, they're pretending to be outraged about an insult that doesn't ever really get used in America.
Yeah.
It's, oh, okay, well, we're gonna ban people for honky. Oh, wow, I get so discriminated against because you called me honky. All this is total lies, and it's meant to appease the right wing. Don't worry, we are cracking down on anti-white racists. It's absurd. There's no such thing. People are pretending that there's a problem when there isn't. It's the usual right-wing victimology. Oh, I'm such a victim. BS, total lies.
So why are you crying, Cenk? You support online censorship. You said ban the racists. The racists are evil and they're taking over. Cenk's nephew was obviously being racist. He is now subject to the same rules as everybody else. And not even really, by the way. He only got suspended for a week. Other people got banned for this because Cenk's nephew is being treated better. He's being prioritized. The connections from the Young Turks, his connections from Twitch are obviously taking precedent over it, but he's acting like a brat on the internet and he's being able to get away with it due to the fact that he has connections, and you're still crying about it because you're like, oh my god, something being enforced against the people whose ideas are pushed in the public obviously and blatantly all the time just as a show enforcement by a company. I don't like it at all. It's not right. Hating white people should be acceptable even more in society, even though it's in every single pop culture medium, every single corporation, every single show and movie and book that comes out and is promoted by the left. No. It needs to be every single place and every single time, regardless of context.
And it's meant to appease the right wing. Don't worry, we are cracking down on anti-white racists. It's absurd. There's no such thing. You did World War I, you did World War II, you did the Crusades, you did the oppression and the subjugation of the entire Southern Hemisphere. So don't come telling any other race who's violent and who is not violent. Don't come to us with any of your stupid racism. So don't come telling any other race. So don't come telling any other race who's violent.
So again, this is what it really comes down to. Cenk is like, listen, anti-white racism is socially acceptable. The idea that these companies would crack down and treat minorities like they're equal in every way on social media platforms is shameful and disgusting. It doesn't exist. Even though I'm for it, I advocate it. I do an entire anti-white show where I promote anti-white hatred constantly. It doesn't exist. Denial, deflection, deceit from the guy who named his organization after the Young Turks who actually committed the Armenian genocide. Look at Anna Kasparian and see who is being genocided in that scenario. By the way, we literally invented the word genocide for what the Young Turks did, and they directly inspired the Nazis. But sure, whatever, anti-white racism, what even is that? So overall, I find this story wonderfully amusing, wonderfully amazing. The left is a professional victim class. They're grievance peddlers. And for 1 second, 1 moment, 1 day, somebody on the left faced the consequences that people on social media platforms have faced for years due to their advocacy, and they can't handle it. And it's a much reduced version of what people on the right were dealing with. People on the right get tagged by vague social media terms of service that aren't really clear, that aren't really fair or justified when they're saying things that aren't even racist. Cenk's nephew saw his moderators get banned for saying something and then proceeded to say it because he felt so entitled being given a career by his uncle and able to parlay that into Twitch success, being able to avoid bans that other people who are not as well connected would have been banned for. And he said it anyway just to make the point that he's above everybody else and the rules don't apply to him. That's who Cenk's nephew is. That's what he's crying about. And that's what the professional left is crying about on his behalf. They don't think it's fair that he should be subject to the same rules as everybody else. And they like the idea that the one kind of racism that's socially acceptable in society is not ever acknowledged nor punished on any of these social media platforms, despite its prevalence, despite its negative impact on our society being immeasurable. But hey, those are just my thoughts. Let me know your thoughts down in the comments below. If you like the video, you can show me by leaving a like. You can subscribe for more content. Follow me on all my social medias. You can support me via the support links down in the description box. This has been me talking about Cenk's nephew being banned for a week and everybody on the left crying about it. Till next time.